Hello, I'm Robert Griffin, the Executive Minister here at the Sunshine Cathedral in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I want to thank you for joining us for worship via the internet today. And if you are ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, let me personally invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. We also invite you to join us on our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter. But for this moment, let's go inside and see what exciting worship opportunity lay in store for us.
A reading from the wisdom of Marianne Williamson. What I place on the altar of my mind is then altered in my life. When I do not know what to say or do, God, who is alive within me, will illumine my thinking and guide my words. When a possible outcome makes me weak with fear, I will feel divine arms around me. And when the road seems lonely and long before me, I know that I'm not alone. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is a reading from the wisdom of the book of Ephesians. Blessed be the God of Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our third reading is a reading from the wisdom of the Psalter. Will you not revive us again, so that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your steadfast love, O God, and grant us your salvation. God will speak peace to the people, to the faithful, to those who seek truth in their hearts. Surely divine help is at hand, that God's glory may dwell in our land. Steadfast love and faithfulness will meet. Righteousness and peace will kiss each other. Faithfulness will spring up from the ground, and righteousness will look down from the sky. God will give what is good, and our land will yield its increase. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Well, we're doing a different sort of thing lately, aren't we? In June, we were rowdy. Church was like a pep rally every week. We had a lot going on. There was a Pride celebration somewhere every week in June. And then the last Sunday of the month was our own Pride service, which just happened to fall on the weekend that marriage equality became a national reality here in the U.S., the 19th country to have marriage equality. There was a big wedding that weekend, and a very important wedding. And the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge sent their regards. It was a big deal. And then also there was a tragedy at a church in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina. And so we were pretty riled up about one thing or another all June, and it felt kind of like a camp meeting. We got our shout on frequently in June. But July has ushered in this summer teaching series. And so that song about peace is very appropriate for the turn we've taken. How it's good to turn cartwheels and get a little crazy every once in a while, but it's also good to get quiet and reflective and to really ponder the truths of our tradition and explore what they may have meant originally and how they can be applied in contemporary settings. So I just want to acknowledge that we're not. We do love to shout and play, but also we like to learn, and so we are going to do a little bit of both throughout the summer. Now, as you undoubtedly know, there is a whole lot of ugly, wrapped in crazy, covered in stupid, and garnished with mean, being served up lately in response to marriage equality. And sadly, that is coming primarily from people who identify as Christian. So it is particularly important, I think, that progressive Christians take the time to deconstruct and reconstruct what it means to be Christian. Because if we are going to surrender the label to the most hateful and aggravated and aggressive voices, then we will not have served the witness of Jesus very well in the world. And so I think that what we are doing is not just learning for the sake of knowing a little more than we might have known, but really deepening our spiritual experience and doing so that we can be a light to hope and justice and healing in the world. Now, the responses, the really onerous, hateful, ugly responses that people are quoting texts left and right, without very sophisticated understandings of them, and even if they were getting them right, they're using them wrong. Anytime you use anything to humiliate or degrade people, that you are misusing it. And so we hear people speaking from fear and contempt, and they are calling for an apocalypse. Really and truly, they are almost wishing. It is so bizarre. They seem to be predicting, but almost salivating while they're doing it, this brutal end of the world that they will sort of escape. It won't involve them somehow. They've got it worked out. That they are going to be on this magical, invisible escalator into the sky. And so while they are escalating up, they call it rapture. When they're rapturing up, they can look down and see the destruction. And won't that be nice? Won't they feel good about that? It's a very bizarre mindset. It really is probably not the way it was intended once upon a time, but it has become, in its use, pretty pathological. And so they're wishing for this apocalypse, for a civil war, for a mass migration. I don't know where they would migrate to. Our neighbor to the north has had marriage equality for over a decade, and our neighbor to the south has it in regions of the country, and it will be nationwide soon. So I don't know where they're going to go. They are hoping for this so-called rapture where they will be sucked up and everyone left behind will be tormented. I really hope that the people who get sucked up are really, really rich, though, so that we can just have all their stuff. You know, that it's not stealing, then it's not looting if it's the rapture. It's just left for us. And so, so I am wishing wealth on the rapture crowd. Because then, we can just take it. It's just up for grabs. Take one, house, free. Car, plane, boat, just take it. Anyway, one fundamentalist of particular notoriety has even threatened that God may strike the White House with lightning in response to marriage equality. Love and justice and equality is so offensive to God that God is just going to unleash destruction, not on the Supreme Court that made the decision, but on the White House. Presumably out of anger at one resident there. Meanwhile, lots of people live and work at the White House. So once again, God. Anyway, this idea that an angry God is unleashing lightning storms on the White House, I can assure you, is bad meteorology. And more importantly, it's bad theology. Theology, how we think about and talk about and relate to what is divine, what is ultimate, what is omnipresent, that is our focus this morning. And I want to share a personal witness in that regard, and I'll do it to make sure that I don't just ramble on and on by reading from my book. We're inspired by Marcus Borg's book for the next several weeks, but I will work in a page of mine saved from salvation, just to keep things rolling along. On page 101 of my book, I write, "I do believe in mystery and possibility, goodness and hope, love and beauty, and the connectedness of all life. And I don't mind calling that big bundle of stuff God. But I long ago rejected a sometimes benevolent, sometimes mischievous, frightening if otherwise admirable Dumbledore sort of deity which seems to remain the default figure of Christian God talk. I once heard a theologian remark, God is the search for God. And that is a God, a journey of possibilities, a constant search for truth, a richer, deeper experience of life, a reverence before what can't be known that I can embrace. When atheists tell me all the reasons they reject the idea of God, that the God they have been told about seems petty, mean, volatile, or bigoted, or that belief in God usually comes with an insistence on non-critical acceptance of superstitions, xenophobia, or a rejection of good science, then I am only too happy to inform them that I don't believe in the same God they have dismissed. I just haven't given up on spirituality, sacredness, divine mystery. And as the conversation unfolds, I find very often that they haven't either. I once read a rabbi's reflection that the religious life is about destroying one false god after another. And once you think you have the real one, you have probably just settled for a bigger and better idol. A Christian theologian once told me, theology is always a mistake, meaning whatever we say about ultimate reality can't be all there is to say about it. We can experience part of what we may believe to be divine, but we cannot experience and certainly not understand every part of it. And the whole must surely be more than our limited experience. As some great thinkers have noted, we cannot know God, we can only experience God. And our explanations of the experience will never do justice to the experience. Our first reading from Marianne Williamson this morning was profound. It agrees with the psalmist's assumption of God's nearness and with the epistle writer's conviction that blessings are at hand. We heard from Williamson, when the road seems lonely and long before me, I will know I am not alone. No matter what, I am not alone. That is a statement of faith that I can embrace and offer others. Not the God who is angry with people for getting married. Not the God who is angry for people for being in love. Not the God who resists justice and equality. Not the God who prefers this religion but will totally reject members of all others. Not the God who prefers men to women or heterosexuals to homosexuals, or the God who doesn't even know what transsexuality is. That is not the God I want to embrace or share. I once had a friend whose parents told him, because he was gay, and they told him, they were from a fundamentalist tradition, and they said, we pray for you 3 hours every day. 3 hours. They weren't even retired. I don't know how they got their work done. But we pray for you 3 hours every day for God to make you straight so that you won't go to hell. And he said to them, well, one, stop praying, because that's not going to happen. But two, I deserve the kind of parents who would go to hell with me rather than worship a God who would send me to hell for being who I am. That's the affirmation that we are not alone. The teachings, the dogmas, the doctrines, the theologies, they get silly and they get mean, they get cruel. But if we can get past all that and just have an experience of divine life, then we won't need to try to deny others their experience. We can just say, that which is includes us all. It has to. Now, this positive, optimistic way of approaching life and spirituality comes from an experience that we can sum up as God is. Period. Or maybe ellipsis, but just God is. We are so tempted to elongate that two-word sentence. We want to say, we don't like open-ended things. We want to close it off. We want to say that God is something. We want to say that God is merciful. But that means that before the mercy, God was judgmental and cranky and just finally got over God's self. And that's not really that flattering a portrayal of God either. We want to say that God is angry at the people we don't like. But that makes God sort of tribal and petty. We want to say that God is limited to certain people or ideologies. We want to make God a noun instead of a verb, a super person instead of a presence, a thing instead of an experience. We want to use language that makes God manageable, controllable to our own interest. We want to use language that makes God very often in the image of our own prejudices, so that we can feel our hatreds are holy, and our fears are faithful, and our rage is righteous. We want God to have skin and gender and personality, and we want that skin and gender and personality to look a lot like our own. And we want God to be on our side. But that winds up being one more graven image, one more false and not terribly useful idol. Moses asked God, "Who are you?" I love the questions in the Exodus story. When they see flaky stuff on the ground, someone says, "What is that? What the heck is that?" That's what manna means. What is it? They named it. What is that? And it could be secretions from plants or from insects, but somebody said, "I don't know, I'm hungry enough to see if it tastes like anything." And it was edible, and it sustained them in a time of need. The honest question, what is that? Let's see. And so Moses asked God, "Who are you?" And the story doesn't say that God answers with a lofty creedal statement. I believe, and I believe, and I believe, and I believe. It wasn't a long thing to remember. It wasn't who to be against or what you had to be part of. Who are you? And the story says that the answer is, I am who I am. What? What kind of answer is that? That is the answer. That is the perfect theological answer. I am, period. I am amness. I am isness. I am. God is, and it takes maturity and faith to let that be the whole of our affirmation of faith. The late Marcus Borg said this about God: God is real, and God is mystery. Now, that's nothing as tangible as we find in creeds, just another way of saying God is. In his book, Convictions, a manifesto for progressive Christians, Borg shares that as a young person fascinated by science, he had abandoned much of the Lutheran theology of his family and was pretty firmly established already as an agnostic. When it came to just hearing things and being told what to believe and who to be against and what days were special and what rituals you had to observe, that sort of stuff started to fall flat on a critical thinking person. But then he had a mystical experience. It wasn't on a mountaintop. It wasn't at a holy site. It wasn't at Lourdes. It wasn't in the presence of the Dalai Lama. It just was somewhere in the Midwest, just out and about. And it was, as most mystical experiences are, very brief. It was almost impossible to describe. He simply looked around and saw the world around him as energy, or as filled with light. It was radiant. A minute or less later, the world was the world that he knew. It had just gone back to normal. But in that brief instant, he realized that there was more to life than he had imagined. There was more to life than what he had seen or experienced or thought about so far. There was more to life than what could be analyzed in any given moment. And one of the ways that he came to understand God was simply as more. And so if he were going to add a word to God is, it would simply be more. More than whatever you've been taught. More than whatever any creed says. More than what any Bible verse says. More than what any tradition says. God is more. And once you think you know what that more is, God is more than that. The young skeptic became a New Testament scholar and spent his entire career sharing a progressive view of Christianity, which included helping people experience the moreness of life, which he called God. Now, moreness cannot be summed up in creeds or scriptures or sacraments. Those things are to help us, not control us, not limit us. They are meant to point beyond themselves. When anything points to itself, it becomes an idol. Those things are meant to point beyond themselves. The Bible, the sacraments, all of it are to point beyond themselves, to send us on an exploration of the mystery of life, the always more, the sacred, or we could say, God. Borg came to realize that God wasn't something to figure out, something to have correct beliefs about. And who gets to judge what is correct, of course? It was that God wasn't an egomaniac, judging and rejecting those who broke rules or couldn't embrace certain opinions. God must be an energizing, life-giving experience, a profound experience that could never be summed up with words or statues or rituals or books. God isn't a thing or even a person. God simply is, and as isness can only be experienced. I think sometimes we argue about God so that we don't have to yield ourselves to the intimacy of experience. It is a frightful thing sometimes just to be in the presence of anything, just to be in the presence of nature, to be in the presence of a loved one. Just to be present is sometimes so scary. And so we defend ourselves by wrapping ourselves in rules and traditions and rites and sacraments. That is so much safer. We get to be right. We get to be the arbiters of what is right and who is in and who is out, and never once have to just be raw in the presence of life itself. And yet, isness can't be understood, can't be explained. It can only be experienced. Now, other mystics would share this same realization that Borg had. The Reverend Peter Gomes, the late minister of the Harvard Memorial Church, said, "Mystery is not an argument for the existence of God. Mystery is the experience of the existence of God." That's good preaching from a Baptist. Episcopal Bishop John Spong said, "God is not a noun that demands to be defined. God is a verb that invites us to live, to love, and to be. To be what we are, just to be." Of course, pure being calls us into our own sense of being. Religion scholar and former Catholic nun Karen Armstrong once said in an interview, "God is unnameable. You can never know the essence of the divine, so Christians have experienced God as parent, a sort of brooding, caring presence, as spirit immanent within us, and as word, which is spoken in Jesus and in creation." And physician turned spiritual teacher Deepak Chopra says, "God is a journey in consciousness." Mystery, verb, experience, journey. These are the words the profound thinkers, the great teachers use to help us with our own spiritual paths. Of course, Jesus could say, "God and I are one," because God is isness. Anything that is has to be an expression of isness. Of course, Jesus and God are one, and so are we. Paul Tillich, perhaps the greatest Protestant theologian of the 20th century, referred to God as the ground of being. Not a being, but the ground of all being, the no thing, which is the substance of all things. That must have been what a Dominican in the Middle Ages, Meister Eckhart, meant when he wrote, "I pray God, rid me of God." In other words, may I be free of theologies and philosophies and dogmas and doctrines so that I can simply experience what can't be adequately named, commune with what can't be described, love and feel loved by that which can't be fully known, trust what can't be seen and yet can be discerned in all that exists. God, rid me of God, might be the most profound prayer of faith ever. It's not the words I used in my faith journey, but it is the sentiment. When the God of my youthful understanding was a tyrant who only had room for people who agreed with very limited views, I wanted to be free from that God. I remember hearing someone in college this was so profound. There was some theological argument, because I went to college in Arkansas, so everyone had theological arguments. Everyone was trying to witness to somebody and save somebody. And of course, that didn't go over as well in the sociology and theater departments, and those were my departments. But still, the people would come over and try to save us. That never worked out well. But one person was saying, this is what you have to do to be saved, for God to love you, for God to be in a relationship with you, for you to be with God forever. You have to believe this, that, and the other thing. You have to accept this, that, and the other opinion. And someone said, well, I don't think Gandhi did any of those things. Oh, no, Gandhi's in hell. And my friend Barbara said, if Gandhi's not in heaven, I don't want to go. Changed my life. It was the 20th century, the 1980s version of God, rid me of God. Rid me of whatever that I am using to make myself cruel and intolerant and using to abuse others, to force them to release their culture, release their personality, release their orientation, release who they are in order to be acceptable to something we can't even prove. Oh, how abusive and mean-spirited that is. What a faithful prayer it is to say, God, rid me of God. Nameless omnipresence, may I release all idols and images that I have called God so that I can simply experience your light in me and in the world. Marcus Borg believed that everything is part of God, and God is in everything. Emerson believed that. Jesus believed that. Borg called God isness, not merely real, but reality itself, not a being separate from the universe, but a reality, a radiant and luminous presence that permeates everything that is. You can't be lost from God because you can't be lost from isness. You can't be lost from I am. You can't be lost from reality. And so getting beyond this almost prehistoric theism where we try to worship that thing in the sky and please it, where we come to experience God as spirit. Jesus said God is spirit. What is spirit? Spirit is energy. Spirit is life. Spirit is isness. The Hebrew word was ruach. It meant wind or energy or power or life force. The Greek word was pneuma, like pneumonia. It means breath. And Jesus said God is spirit. And spirit is isness. It is the ground of being. We can't be separate from God. Borg called God reality itself, a radiant presence that permeates everything. If we get past the theologies and past the traditions and past the rituals, we may just come to experience that God is in us, expressing as us. And with that as our truth, all is well. If God is omnipresent, then our faith isn't about believing the right things or being against the wrong people. Christianity isn't this or that belief about the symbol of the Trinity. It isn't about arguing over what made Jesus important. It isn't about escaping an afterlife prison camp or getting to an afterlife country club in the sky. If God is omnipresent, then we will all be in God's presence forever. Religion isn't meant to get us there. It's meant to help us realize we are already there and help us start enjoying that and being empowered by that realization now. Being Christian isn't about beating us into saying we believe certain things about God or Jesus or the Bible. It's about following Jesus' example of journeying deeper into the mystery that many of us call God. Jesus called it Abba. We can call it whatever we want as long as we are not limiting the experience to the name that we made up anyway. Christianity is about communing with this omnipresence and knowing ourselves to be part of it. We can't know much about God, but we can know our experience of God. We can't figure God out, but we can trust God in us. We can't make God fit into a theology, a doctrine, a hymnal, or a tradition, but we can experience the light of God in our own lives. Being a Christian is about saying God is, and then having the courage to leave it at that. Now, you're probably thinking that Christianity is about action as well. And you are correct. But remember, it's a 9-week series. You got to come back. If you were willing to affirm God is, and then resist the temptation to layer a lot of rules and dogma on top of that, then you are ready to experience more of God beyond anything you thought you knew about God. And experiencing more of God is, after all, what it means to be Christian. And this is the good news. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. If you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, we invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, or if you'd like to find out other resources that the Cathedral has to offer, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, we look forward to seeing you here at the Sunshine Cathedral.